Today we'll take a look at the final verses to the Church of Thyatira. We pick up with the verses spoken to the overcomers.
He who overcomes, and he who keeps my deeds until the end, to him I will give authority over the nations, and he shall rule them with a rod of iron, as the vessels of the potter are broken to pieces. As I also have received authority from my Father, and I will give him the morning star. He who has an ear, let him hear what the Spirit says to the churches.
Verse 26 is telling us that if we refuse to follow false teachings like those of Jezebel and others, but rather continue in the works of Jesus and persist until death or his return, whichever comes first, then that person who overcomes will be rewarded. Here is what is interesting. We are told that the reward is ruling the nations. So what does that mean? I won't go into great detail here in this chapter, but this is a reference to what we will learn in later chapters. But to give a quick glimpse of coming attractions, in the future, Jesus will return to earth and rule and reign as the perfect king. This promise is referencing that we will not be dusting clouds in the sky, but rather we will return with Christ, renewed and sinless, to help rule and reign here on earth for 1,000 years. In later chapters, we learn why and begin to understand who we will rule and reign over. Next it says, and he shall rule them with a rod of iron. This sounds a bit harsh, like it's a weapon. So let's look at the original language. The word that's translated as rule is poimino, and what it actually means is to shepherd by caring for and protecting the flock. This would include guarding, guiding, and feeding his people. In other words, teaching them scripture. A very different picture, wouldn't you say? And what about the rod? Well, the Greek word is hrabdos, which means a staff or a scepter. What is a scepter symbolic of? A king's authority of governance. Why does Christ mention that the scepter is made of iron? Because it paints a picture of strength. It paints a picture of it being a substance that is unbreakable. And so the picture it paints is not violence, but rather perfect governance that can't be corrupted. Hebrews chapter 1 verse 8 supports this concept.
But of the Son he says, Your throne, O God, is forever and ever, and the righteous scepter is the scepter of his kingdom.
Next, let's talk about the vessels of the potter. This metaphor comes from the Old Testament, where clay vessels represent people or nations. Breaking them symbolizes decisive judgment or subjugation. Listen to Jeremiah 18, 1-6.
The word which came to Jeremiah from the Lord, saying, Arise and go down to the potter's house, and there I will announce my words to you. Then I went down to the potter's house, and there he was, making something on the wheel. But the vessel that he was making of clay was spoiled in the hand of the potter. So he remade it into another vessel, as it pleased the potter to make. Then the word of the Lord came to me, saying, Can I not, O house of Israel, deal with you as this potter does, declares the Lord? Behold, like the clay in the potter's hand, so are you in my hand, O house of Israel.
What does the second half of this verse mean when it talks about vessels broken and authority? These are complex verses, but God gives his Son the authority and entrusts him with the kingdom because of his humility and obedience. His power and glory came through submission and willingness to go to the cross. And like a good shepherd, he carries our burdens and sins. Therefore, Christ is given the authority to judge and break the corrupted people and nations like pottery. And those who overcome get the privilege of ruling with him. What he is saying to this church is that anything built on falsehood, corruption, or rebellion simply will not and cannot endure against that rod of iron, which symbolizes unbreakable truth, and that the overcomers get to share in the victory. Verse 28 is the continuation of the promise that started in verse 27 for those who overcome the challenges and the false temptations of life.
It reads, "And I will give him the morning star."
Now, some will automatically think of Isaiah 14:12, where it points to the fall of Lucifer, aka Satan. But that word Lucifer literally just means shining one or light bringer. Fast forward to Revelation 22:16, and we read that Christ refers to himself as the morning star. So we don't need to guess who the reference is pointing to. The real question becomes, what does it mean? The phrase morning star symbolically represents brightness, beauty, and the arrival of light after darkness. But what Christ is really talking about is a personal experience. Christ himself being revealed inside of us, flooding our lives with his light and his understanding. It starts with his death that leads to his ascension in glory. Similarly, it paves the way for us to die to our old ways, which only brings darkness, to rebirth, where we start living from a new source of light. His victory now becomes our victory. We're talking about a kind of glory that's beyond us, and we, the simple clay pots that are fragile, hold a treasure inside us that's his life, his power. It's designed that way so that when power is displayed, everyone knows it's from God and not from us. It's about bringing the reality of heaven to earth through us right here, right now. It's about getting the privilege to be the light in a dark world until the day we remain with him forever. Lastly, Christ repeats what he has said to all the churches. He who is willing to listen, apply what I have said so that you will be an overcomer. Tune in next time when we will look at the period of time this church prophetically represents.